Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 9th season of EdTalks and our 5th event of the 2020 season. My name is Adia Morris, and I am thrilled to be with you tonight as the event MC. I use she, her pronouns. We're coming to you virtually from Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota, or Minnesota Makoche. This is the homeland of the Dakota people. It's important for us to recognize that unless we're Indigenous Dakota, we're on stolen land, taken through an unauthorized and illegitimate treaty in 1805. We recognize the acts of genocide committed against Native people, and perhaps most importantly, we acknowledge that Indigenous people are still here and present all around us. As we gather together here tonight, I ask that you keep the troubled history of our state in your hearts and minds. I'm really excited for you to hear from the speakers we have scheduled for this evening, who'll speak on access and education. Before we start, just a few housekeeping things. I want to take a moment to thank our generous sponsor, the Bush Foundation. Bush Foundation has supported this program for many, many years, and we continue to be so grateful for their partnership. We're also really grateful for the additional support that they'll be providing for EdTalks in our next season. So thank you, Bush Foundation. We've pre-recorded both talks for the event tonight to make sure that everything works well with technology. We all know Zoom, things can go a little hinky. But our presenters are going to be online later with us to participate in a Q&A at the end of the program. One of our speakers, Chastity Lord, will be joining us from New York. So thank you, Zoom, for that. The Q&A session is going to come at the end of both presentations. We encourage you to submit your questions via the Q&A function at any time. So if you're looking for where that is down, if you're on a laptop, it's down in the bottom menu and there's a button that says Q&A. You'll use that. Our event is scheduled to conclude at 8 p.m., but we're going to hang on just a little bit longer if we need more time to get through the Q&A. We also encourage you to engage with social media during and after the event. So please use the hashtag EdTalksMN. I'm also joined by my 3-year-old, so you might hear him in the background. This event is being recorded for EdTalks video and audio libraries, which you can find by visiting our webpage at achievempls.org/EdTalks. So let's get started. I am so happy to introduce our first presenter of the evening, Chastity Lord. Chastity is the president and CEO of Jeremiah Program and has spent 2 decades dismantling systems of inequity for marginalized communities. Utilizing a social justice lens to bridge opportunity gaps, she specializes in organizational development, education, college access, fundraising, and leadership development. Before joining Jeremiah Program, she held C-level roles at several other national nonprofits, including Color of Change, Achievement First, and the Posse Foundation. Chastity has a BA in Organizational Communication from the University of Oklahoma and an MBA in Strategy and Marketing from Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. She is a former Pahara Aspen Fellow with the Aspen Global Leadership Network and serves on the board of Shriver National Center on Poverty and Law. Welcome, Chastity. We're so glad you're here today.
When I was a child, I spent a lot of time at the library. I loved books. I loved words. I loved the way that people put words together. And what I really enjoyed is the way that people put words together to take something really complex and make it simple. I think James Baldwin did that beautifully when he described poverty. When he says, anyone who has ever struggled with poverty in this country understands how expensive it is to be poor. Anyone who has struggled with poverty in this country understands how expensive it is to be poor. I remember when I first started to understand the cost of poverty, what I like to call the poverty tax. And I think about school. And I used to be on something they called free and reduced lunch. And what that meant is for kids that came from a certain socioeconomic background, they got this booklet and it was blue. And what you were charged with doing was, before you could get breakfast, you had to tear out this little square and you had to hand it to the lunch person and you got your breakfast. And when it was lunchtime, you had to tear out another square and you hand it to the lunch person and you got your lunch. But the blue ticket became powerful when I started to understand that everyone didn't have one. There were some kids who were walking up to that lunch counter and just giving their name. You see, they had an account. And I started to understand how poor it can feel, how expensive it can feel to be poor. And I started to call these things blue ticket moments. And I remember one of the other big blue ticket moments was also around school. And it was also around this time where there was a lot of conversation regarding the quality of education in large urban centers, quote unquote, the inner city. And one of the new big ideas was that we were going to bus kids from one community to another community where they had better schools. And what that meant in real terms was that I was getting up around 5 o'clock in the morning to get to a bus stop around 5:45. And it was as dark as this picture seems. And I would be on that bus for 60 to 90 minutes. And we would get to school, the bus would pull up right there in front, and we would be getting off that bus, headed to breakfast, and other kids would be getting out of their cars, headed to breakfast with more sleep. It was a blue ticket moment because I was also headed into breakfast where I had to pull out another blue ticket and have another blue ticket moment. I also remember in school times of great joy where we would be putting on a performance and we had our little costumes, we had our little lines, and we were practicing, and everybody was excited because each grade was going to have their moment on stage. And they had invited parents and guardians to be in the audience. And I remember being on the stage, and I remember there were kids who were looking into the eyes of their parents and guardians. And there were kids like me. And we were also looking to the eyes of their parents and guardians because I knew my mom wasn't going to be there. Because she had a job that if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. A blue ticket moment. How expensive it can be to be poor. You know, Audre Lorde talks about folks don't live single issue lives because they don't have a single issue struggle. People don't have a single issue struggle because they don't live single issue lives. At Jeremiah program for the past 20 years, we've been really holding the importance of the family unit. We've been really holding that you have to invest in the mom and the kid if you are going to disrupt generational poverty. Over the last year, we've been even more reflective and started to really pull on the lever of what we're calling the inside out strategy, really putting moms and kids at the center of everything we do. We feel that they are the unit of change. And so what does that mean? It's the lens in which we do the work. And one of the lenses is generational poverty is a social justice issue. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that you have to acknowledge that providing a mom with a job, that is important. By providing a mom with a home, that is important. By providing a mom with access to education, that is important. But it is deeply insufficient if you are going to disrupt generational poverty. That will only allow you to play whack-a-mole. You have to acknowledge that in order to have an unjust public educational system, You also have to have an unjust housing system. You have to have an unjust health justice system in order to have an unjust criminal justice system. You have to be willing to hold the complexity of the ecosystem of injustice in our country. It's about getting at the root of what has to be true for us to forecast with high levels of fidelity that someone born into poverty will remain in poverty. It's dealing with the top of the plant, but also being willing to deal with the challenging, the complex root. Generational poverty is a social justice issue. It's one of the lenses, first and foremost, we have to acknowledge. The second lens that we've really been focusing on is reframing the conversation. Reframing the conversation and acknowledging the conscious and unconscious bias we have in this country regarding poverty and single moms. And we deeply believe there's a correlation, the same way that Brene Brown's research talks about resiliency and shame and identity development. We think that shame and that resiliency also shows up regarding how a mom thinks about their ability to bet on themselves as well as betting on their child. We think that shame also plays into college persistence and graduation. Vincent Tinto has done some incredible work as a researcher in higher ed around the sense of belonging. What happens when we refocus the conversation and we start to acknowledge the way we have around crack? We were crack addicts in the 80s. Now, with the opioid crisis, and because it is infiltrating other families and sitting at other tables, we're starting to think about it as a mental health issue. And we're starting to understand the grace of addiction being a mental health issue. We're also looking at our criminal justice system differently because more people are finding themselves arrested because of the opioid crisis. And we're talking about things like folks are no longer convicts. They're formally incarcerated, and some of us have even involved by returning citizens. Imagine if we brought that grace to single moms experiencing poverty, and they start with the baseline that they actually are great moms. And we start to acknowledge that middle class and upper middle class America don't have a monopoly on parenting. We start to acknowledge that poverty, families living in poverty doesn't mean that they're unhappy, that there is joy, the same way that there might be joy in middle class and upper middle class homes. Reframing the conversation and starting to understand the implications of how narratives influence identity. And this last lens is around expanding the leadership tent. Oftentimes, we think about leaders once you have accomplished the degree, once you have accomplished making X, once you have the title, and we deeply believe by creating spaces for moms to be leaders as they move along that economic mobility ladder, there's something powerful happens. Our moms start to not only want to reimagine and redefine for their families, but they also start to want to redefine and reimagine for their communities. And they understand they have a role in doing that also for their country. When we expand the leadership tent and we let them know that when you walk into that college classroom, you are a leader, and you bring all of your identities, you pack them up and you put them in the book bag and you bring them and you sit them in that classroom. When you're talking about economics, you talk about what it means to experience poverty through that lens. You bring the fact that you're a single mom and you sit it in that economics classroom and you let folks grapple with the complexity of how our country is structured. We deeply believe that folks most proximate to the issue, like our moms, should also be most proximate to the mic. We do not think that we are going to be able to deliver incredible ideas and solutions by just wanting moms to be at tables of positional power. We have to create a space for them to be able to influence the agenda. And for many of you, you're feeling like this is overwhelming. Where do I fit in? How do I actually take this on? The complexity of it all. I want you to channel Shirley Chisholm, because I want you to remember and just imagine if the lunch person had said, I don't take blue tickets in my line. I'm going to create a list and I'm going to check off names. She would have diffused the blue ticket moment. Imagine if the bus driver says, you know what? It's not a policy to pull up in front of the school. I'm going to pull up on the side of the school and let the kids go into the side gate. He could have diffused the blue ticket moment. Imagine if a mom would have said, you know what? I'm the PTA president. We do 3 events every year. One of those are going to be after school because we want to make sure that as many parents can come, and while they're picking up their kids, we could all go ahead and have the programming. That could have diffused the blue ticket moment. Yes, what we're talking about, generational poverty being a social justice issue, is overwhelming. Some of us have the opportunity to hold and influence blue ticket moments that have reverberating impacts on communities, on companies, on organizations. Some of us have the opportunity to influence the lunch line. We all matter. But you have to understand, as Shirley Chisholm said, don't wait for an invitation. If you don't have a seat at the table, you have to be willing to bring your folding chair. And I want you to know something. I'm not asking you to do anything that I'm not willing to do. I want you to know that I'm committed to bringing my voting chair, but I'm also committed to taking up room today and every day. Join me.
Thank you so much, Chastity. That was excellent. I have a lot of moments of going, my own affirmations. I wish everybody could hear me. This is a quick reminder now to everybody to submit your questions via Q&A as they come to you. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the program. Next, we'll hear from Augustine, who will discuss white supremacy within the technology field and how it impacts education. Is a network engineer, social innovator, and serial entrepreneur. In response to outcries from her community in 2020, founded Project Nandi, which provides technical support, laptops, and broadband assistance for Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, and other families to promote educational equity and improve learning outcomes for students. In shifting her own business to the new pandemic norms, Augustine successfully started a social enterprise that, in the words of one mother, completely changed my family's outlook on life. Since May 2020, Project Nandi has served over 100 families and almost 200 children as it strives to make the world a more equitable, accessible place for Black and Brown people to thrive. Welcome, Eni.
My first Network Plus training at NCTC. The teacher asked for volunteers and I was so excited I raised my hand and he lined me up at the front of the class and said, "This woman likely will not pass my class. Most people don't pass my class. So I'm going to give everyone the opportunity today that if you feel like you are not capable of this class, you should just leave. Don't remove the plastic from your book, because if you remove the plastic from your book, you won't be able to return it. You'll be out all that money." Humiliated and ashamed, I was still steadfast. I decided that I was going to pass the class. I failed. That experience taught me that technology was not going to be an easy field, that aggressiveness and potentially even violence could be used against me. I didn't really find out how true that was going to be until the quarantine. During the quarantine, I was working all over the state, working furiously, sweating and cursing, trying to keep the grid up. I was in the middle of cornfields and central offices, trying to upgrade servers that were literally hissing under the weight of the increased demand during quarantine. One day I was sent to the Mall of America to do a survey for a new donut shop that was opening, yes, during quarantine. As I tried to get into the mall, which was locked. The police came, lights blaring, guns pulled with drug dogs, and questioned me what I was doing there. As I explained that I had been sent on a job order to do technical support for a donut shop, they refused to believe me. Again, guns pointed at me. And I realized in that moment that the extreme danger I was in, the sacrifices that I was making to try and keep this country going in our time of need, meant nothing compared to the color of my skin. And I realized in that moment that my life was literally worth less than a donut shop. The digital divide means that Black and people of color are systematically kept from technology, internet, and access to employment, housing, and jobs. And technology is the actual system of oppression that is used to keep the status quo. It's not accidental. During quarantine, I realized that most of the Black and brown children in my neighborhood did not have access to laptops or internet, and were trying to go to school on cell phones and tablets. And that's why I launched Project Nandi. I had been repairing laptops for over 10 years on my own, just to have cheap laptops available for a lot of the immigrants and people of color that I knew that couldn't afford to spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars on computers. And so I gave all of those away, and then started fundraising to be able to provide more of them to more people, because I saw that the schools were not doing the work. Even into the summer, families and parents had not been contacted with resources. And so I launched Project Nandi with the support of my community to help close the digital divide. And the digital divide is a purposeful system of oppression intended to reserve knowledge of technology for the male, white, chosen few. Just last week, a child was paddled by a principal in Florida for accidentally breaking a computer. Here in Minnesota, an East African U of M student was physically threatened by staff when he attempted to rent a computer that was his right as a student at the U of M. People talk about systemic racism as though it's accidental, inadvertent, and almost invisible. I'm here to tell you today that real violence is used to keep people out of technology education, keep people out of technology, period. And it's a sad state of affairs. I, as a Black woman in technology, am less than 1% of the workforce in America. And this comes with the knowledge that some of the first computers were Black people, were Black women. The movie Hidden Figures has brought more attention to that fact. But just as in any industry, most industries in America, Black people were the first. We were the first farmers. We were the first mechanical things. We were the first computers. And people don't realize that a computer essentially at first was simply a human being that did advanced mathematical calculations. So why is it that at companies like Google and Facebook, Black employment is less than 3%? Well, I mean, not only is it a toxic environment typically for Black people, it can be physically dangerous, as I've demonstrated to you so far. And the fact is that computer language is conducted in zeros and ones, and zero originates in Egypt and Africa. So again, there could literally be no computers without Black people. yet we are systematically attacked and forced out of the industry. And again, that's not an accident, because knowledge of technology is again its own system of oppression that is used to surveil, abuse, and hurt communities of color. And so I started Project Nandi to close the digital divide and help people of color step into their birthright of access and knowledge for technology. My program comes from love. Project Nandi is named after Queen Nandi of the Zulus, who was one of history's historical single mothers, who raised Shaka Zulu, one of the most famous and, in some people's opinion, best kings of the Zulus, on her own. As she fought for her child's education and potential, I also fight for every child of color's education and potential. And in 2021, that means access to technology and knowledge of how to use it. Some of the strategies that I use within Project Nandi, again, come from wanting to show people that the community cares about them. While I give out laptops and desks and resources, I really give hope and an experience that's positive during a time when so very much is negative. With each family that I work with, I talk to them about what their needs are. It's all family directed. I provide food. I help them get connected to broadband internet and whatever resources they need. Many of our children have physical disabilities with hearing or sight. So getting them the technology they need to be able to access education in a way that makes sense for them. That's what we do at Project Nandi. And so it seems pretty simple, but for whatever reason, other organizations have kind of struggled in this area for years. And again, the key is creating an experience that's warm, that's welcoming, and that's family-based. We never separate the child out from their family, from their environment to work with them. So that they're comfortable, we meet them where they are and work with them at their level and customize it so that they're comfortable. One of the messages that I share with every parent that we work with is I tell them, thank you. Parenting is not easy work. It's done for free and with very little support. And I think from some of the news we've heard recently, we see what happens when children are unsupervised. And just imagine what would happen if every parent gave up, what the world would be like. We are unprepared for a hot child summer, I can tell you that right now. And so I tell every family and every parent, whether it's going well or it's going badly, good job, because you're still going. And the work that you do is meaningful for our way of life to keep our society going. And this is the least that we as a community can do to support you. Removing the idea of yourself as a savior or as an expert is key to working with communities of color, especially when it comes to technology. Imagine how that child that was paddled in Florida for breaking a computer is now going to relate to technology. She's going to be terrified of touching cell phones, of touching laptops, of them breaking, of her being hurt again. And that is the situation that's set up for people of color. And then when people of color feel uncomfortable around technology or don't want to use it, they're then blamed for it. When they tried to access it, they were rebuffed. When they tried to use it, they were punished. And now everyone's suddenly confused about why they don't like technology when it's been used to physically oppress them. Even social media, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the most mediocre, dangerous men in America, fully responsible for January 6th and even the rise of the right wing. And those are some of the outcomes to having a digital divide. People of color, not only are we some of the originators of some of these technologies that we're using, we have a right to be able to have that knowledge, to be able to carry it with us, and to be able to pass it on. So some of the ways that I lower barriers to technology is, number one, by making it about more than a computer. I don't just drop a laptop off at these homes. They're custom decorated in the child's favorite colors. If they're puppies, there's puppies on them. If they're basketball, there's a basketball on it. And I make sure that they're comfortable. I make sure everything works. And I let them know that if it doesn't, it may not be their fault. I also let them know that if anything happens with the computer, they don't have to be afraid because we will fix it for them at no additional cost. And our families don't pay anything for our services anyway, but just to let them know that they're not alone. This is not a one and done situation. This is an ongoing relationship that we're building. And it's worked so far. Meeting people where they at, within the family, where they're comfortable has absolutely worked. We even had a family where the mother and daughter were in school together. After all this time, the mother finally decided to go back and get her GED, and her daughter sat down at the table together learning. Now, part of this is also broadband equity. A lot of the homes that I went to did not have broadband access, and getting that broadband access was an upward hill battle. When they would call in to the cable company or phone company, they would get what I call slammed, where they would get signed up for a more expensive package and were told on the phone, I heard them being told on the phone, that they would later be able to sign up for the cheaper low-cost packages, which was not true. And so they were being taken advantage of. And what I'm saying is public knowledge. Comcast/Xfinity has been caught doing this, has been fined for doing this, and continues to do this. And again, it's families of color that get caught in the crossfire. So something as simple as helping them place that order online or being on the phone with them when they call has really helped the families just be able to get access to the things and discounts that they're entitled to. So these small little changes where we center the child and we center the family around the service rather than the other way around have been very successful for us so far. We've worked with close to 200 families and children this school year. And so moving forward, our goals are to make technology more accessible through a couple different strategies. So we are going to be starting a technology-based experimental garden in North Minneapolis and use it as a way to provide free community Wi-Fi for the block that our garden is located on. And the idea is to invite the community to come garden. And gosh, anyone can dig a hole or pour some water, right? Well, while you're here, why don't we just build a network cabinet? I already have all the materials. Sure, you can cut some wire too. And so again, just using these methods to make people aware that they have the capacity and the capability to do this specialized magic called internet or called technology. Technology is obviously bigger than a computer. It's cell phones, it's TVs, it's cameras now. And so adjusting the meaning of technology from something that is so lofty and unattainable to something real that they can touch, that they can feel. I think that's going to be the key, and that has been the key to a lot of our success. And so moving forward, that is what we are focused on. We're kind of meeting at the intersection of art and technology, of humanity and technology, and getting comfortable being there. And I think that that is going to be the key to moving forward and closing the digital divide and bringing more people of color back into technology. And I say back into technology because, again, as the originators of many of these technologies who've been pushed out, our intellectual property has been stolen. And we need to reclaim that. And so that is what Project Nandi is about, and that's what my mission is about. And that's something that is critical for me moving forward into the future. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eni, for sharing such awesome insights. I was really moved, and I'm interested to hear more from you about all of your experiences. So now is the chance for a conversation in our EDTalks event with the presenters through the Q&A. Please go ahead and drop your questions into the Q&A function. We'll get to as many as we can. And while we are getting set up, I just want to welcome Eni and Chastity in person. Thank you so much for being here. It's good to see your faces live as well as on video. Thank you both for your presentations. As I said, there were a lot of vocalizations from me. I'm glad my child didn't suddenly start going, why are you saying that, Mama? Why are you going, So thank you both for really thought-provoking work. I wanted to start with just a few questions from me, since it doesn't look like anybody has had the chance to write theirs in there. Chastity, when you talked about the Jeremiah program and supporting moms and kids, I wanted to ask, the question popped into my mind, why not dads?
Yeah. First of all, good evening to everyone. I just want to say that. And I don't think it's why not dads, it's what we do. We deeply support the role of second parents within our moms' relationships. Jeremiah program is just laser focused on single moms and their kids. And so it's important for folks to hear that we don't exclude the second parent that is a part of that child's life, but these are single moms, and curating a world that really centers and holds their identity and their unique kind of family unit. Maybe one day we might explore that, but it's how we started and how we are kind of thinking about how to continue to strengthen and better understand our theory of change around that. Fair question. But dads rock.
Yes, of course. Just good to get to hear more about why the focus on moms and children. Eni, a question for you, and forgive me for mispronouncing the name of your project. You mentioned that you had worked with 200 children, and as you were talking about the work that goes into Project Nandi, I wonder how much time is invested in each kid and family, because it sounds like with that volume and with the work, it could be a decent amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I've never calculated. I mean, it's what I do full time now. I have not been doing much tech support for anyone outside of my family since the launch of the program. So I want to be fully transparent about that. If I had to guesstimate, I mean, it would be a minimum of 10 hours, because we spend about 3 hours of prep time with the family before actually going out to the home, at least an hour on setup. And then if you add up grocery shopping and tracking down all of the various items that this family might need, and then the ongoing relationship, I'd probably say 5 to 10 hours a piece.
Excellent. Yeah, I love the focus for both of you on really taking the whole individual and acknowledging everything that they come to you with and come to the world with. I think that's key. We have a question from Michael O'Connell. Chastity, what do you feel is the most transformative part of the Jeremiah program?
First of all, good evening, Michael. Michael's actually the founder of the Jeremiah program, so he's a little backdooring it. But I'm going to surprise him. I think it's the aggregate. And I think that's one of the challenges that we have in our society. We're trying to identify the one variable, the panacea that's going to be the solution and kind of quote unquote level the playing field. But I think it's the actual aggregate of all of the inputs, really centering an identity, really creating a space where a mom is able to bet on themselves and their child, really understanding the importance of housing, food justice, education, early childhood, creating that beloved community. I think it's the aggregate that's actually the secret sauce, and being willing to sit in that complexity is what makes us unique. Thanks for the question, Michael.
I want to follow up about that. How do folks experience sitting in that complexity? How does that manifest?
Which folks are you referring to?
Everybody who's doing the work, the folks who are doing the work, and the folks who are going through the program too.
Well, why don't I start with the folks doing the work? And I think Eni can attest to this. This has been a unparalleled, deeply, I don't have the word for it, year and a half, maybe even I would say 4 years. And so holding what it means to be leading in this moment, while also you're talking about your little one, like, parenting in this moment, being a part of partnerships as well as kind of professionally, that complexity that many of our staff are holding in their day jobs, they're also holding, within their own personal lives. It's been overwhelming. And it has also been a testament to the need for that, all of those different inputs. We are living why we are not living single issue lives either as staff, that, the childcare matters, the housing matters, the food matters. And so I think there is a level of humility and reminder that has been brought to a lot of the folks that work at Jeremiah. Regarding our moms, I think I heard a mom say it best, is that the pandemic and the quote unquote racial awakening has brought a lot of people to their knees, has brought a lot of people to deep points of disappointment. She says, in a lot of ways, I just feel like people have just joined me. I've been there. And it's important for our, listeners, for what we know to be true, is that the social safety net wasn't working for our families before the pandemic, wasn't working for our families before the economic downturn. It has just kind of emboldened the depths of disparity. And so it's important to know that it didn't just show up over this kind of past period. And so that's how I would answer that. They're holding the complexity the way they've always held it, the Baldwin quote, being poor is very expensive.
If I could also interject, absolutely, to agree with everything that Chastity is saying. From my point of view, having to move through a society in which I'm always going to be too big, too tall, and not quite right, the fact that we are all kind of forced to hold complexity feels oddly comfortable. For the first time, I have permission to be a little bit messy. We have permission to spend time with our children and not be separated. There is no option but for me to bring my complete self to most interactions. And so while it has been traumatic, a portion of me welcomes the breakdown of being fractured constantly and consistently in every space in which I might want to occupy.
You know what I love about that is beautiful, and we're not going to take you out of it, but what I love about that is, I've been talking about COVID-19 in a lot of ways has been a national case study. because there's a shared experience. Let's be very clear. Some of us have yachts, some of us have canoes, some of us have dinghies. And like a lot of our JP moms, they've been in the water and been drowning. But it creates a shared language and a shared understanding of the intersection of all of those pieces. We understand something like COVID-19, that is a health pandemic issue, is showing up powerfully regarding the inequity in technology in public education, as Edie talked about. We're seeing how it shows up in health justice. We're seeing how it shows up in criminal justice, who disproportionately have been locked in our criminal justice system. And where is that disparity showing up? And where is it showing up in housing? And so you take something like COVID and it creates a tool, at least, that people have to be in conversation with in a very different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I welcome it occasionally, I welcome it occasionally, but I do think it has been created this powerful canvas.
Excellent way to put it, both of you. And thank you, Eni, for chiming in, because I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on that question. Chastity, what does, there's a strong education component at the Jeremiah program. What does that look like? How does it function?
One of the things that I will say first and foremost is education not a panacea. It's not a panacea for inequity in our country, but it's important for us to acknowledge first and foremost, it is still the most dominant economic mobility lever that we have in our country. And so first and foremost, that is why it enters into the conversation. Let's not catch amnesia that economic mobility in the absence of traditional education is the way that we have organized ourselves as a country. There's a couple of ways that it shows up. It shows up in the traditional kind of manner around economic mobility, college matriculation, persistence, and graduation, really coaching and supporting moms to be thoughtful about emerging workforce trends and making sure they're aligning their majors around that. It's also around coaching regarding making sure not to fall into the pitfalls regarding, student loans and some of the aspects there. It's also about, and I talked about in the talk, it's about bringing your identity into the classroom. Don't put your head down, you have something to add to the conversation. And then I would also say, and this is nuanced, but our empowerment and leadership component in education, within that, being in conversation with the woman you are, the woman you've been, and the woman you desire to be. Oftentimes we don't create space to be in that trifecta, and that is where our power resides, really honoring and understanding Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better, but creating space for all of those kind of places. And so that education piece is traditional education, but it's also an education around kind of allowing you to have the luxury to reflect, which oftentimes folks from marginalized communities aren't given that luxury to be in conversation around that, as well as the career and workforce development. And the last piece I would say is around a community of belonging and that sisterhood. And it sounds super qualitative, but we know that it's powerful to see and hear yourself. One of the ways that, as Eni talked about, one of the ways that they dilute systems of inequity can dilute our powers, making us think that we are unique or unusual. And when moms can actually be in conversation around shared experience, there's something that affirms and understands that you're more than this moment. The difference between where you stand and where you sit and where someone else sits is that the safety net. Life happened and you didn't have a safety net. Life happened for somebody else and they had a trampoline.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Another question for Eni. With 200 families that you've worked with, are there any students and families who are expressing an interest in going into a technological career?
Yes, absolutely. And that's, on purpose. I've given out a couple of laptops that had decorations that were the motherboard of a computer as their decoration in the kids' favorite colors. I had a little girl who, when she heard that I was a network engineer, decided that she was going to try and put together her own chair that we brought her instead of waiting for her brother. And she did successfully and sent me the photo. And so that's, it's part of the point. I realized fairly early on that my mere presence as a Black woman in network engineering was going to have an impact on little girls and boys that were Black and brown. And I have fully leaned into that. And that's, we're now working on summer programming and fundraising for our summer programs. And we are going to be integrating technology into the programs. One of the programs is Joy on Film, where we will use digital cameras to capture things that have been bringing the children joy. And then, like I mentioned in the talk, the technology-based garden. And so we're just trying to help people understand and feel comfortable with the fact that technology isn't always going to be about a computer.
Excellent. Thank you. A couple questions that came up in the Q&A. One from Eric. How does a 59-year-old white guy that grew up in Northwest Wisconsin and now lives and works in the Twin Cities metro area help with the efforts of our two speakers and social justice and community bridging in general? I don't know if anyone wants to, either of you want to jump on that one first?
Eric,
I'm happy.
Go ahead.
The main thing that you can do is, number one, decenter your comfort level and prioritize the comfort level of the people that you work with. Simply by the nature of being who you are, there's a tendency to prioritize you whether or not you have asked for it, through habit and also the way that our society is kind of set up. So making an effort to, deprioritize yourself and center yourself within that conversation. And then also leveraging your privilege to the benefit of the people that you serve. I mentioned in my talk just simply being on the phone with people with my Midwestern accent, leveraging that privilege to get them the services that they should have been entitled to. Leveraging who you are and leaning into that for the benefit of the people you serve will certainly be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would just add on to that, Eric. It's important for us to all acknowledge we have ownership of blue ticket moments and look for the moments in your life that you are either not honoring your power in that experience, but also look for the moments in your life where you can actually diffuse. And the last thing I will say is we need donors and door openers. We need people who are going to put assets, investments within our organizations, within us as leaders, within how we are thinking about and doing the work. And we need door openers, people that you're going to introduce us to kind of keep that contagion. And you notice I didn't say donors or door openers, it's donors and door openers. So thank you, Eric.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question from the Q&A from Cheryl. With all of the injustice and disparaging things happening in our country today, how do you provide hope to those with whom you lead and support?
Cheryl, the way that I think about it is, I don't think people need hope. I think what we need is to remember. What I remember, that I stand on the shoulders of heroes and sheroes that have come before me. Those that know me know that I often talk about my grandmother and mother couldn't have dreamed my life because they didn't know people like me. And so I have to understand that this is our moment, this is my moment to do for those that will come after me. And it's about showing up, it's about being present, as Annie talked about. It's around decentering yourself. It's about understanding that Harriet didn't have magic dust. She had the same number of chromosomes I had. I'm sure she felt overwhelmed. I'm sure she felt frustrated. I'm sure she felt scared. But what she did is she was willing to bet on herself, and she was willing to enlist others in that vision. And so what I think we have to do, Cheryl, is I think we have to be willing to bet on ourselves, and we have to be willing to enlist others in that vision, because that takes vulnerability. But know that there's no magic dust. We have to demystify our heroes and sheroes. They wake up and go to sleep the same way that we do.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. I'd like to also add on, that a critical part of my program is individualization. And there's something that I know me and a lot of my friends have been talking about called toxic positivity, which is the social pressure to respond and achieve and overcome in every situation, especially as people of color. And an acknowledgement that there are certain situations that cannot be tolerated. So when we talk about giving hope, is that what the person in this specific situation actually needs and wants? Sitting with that question and letting the person you're working with answer it, I think is going to be key.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that too.
Mm-hmm.
I love that too. And also knowing that sometimes even when we don't want it, it doesn't mean that we don't need it. But I love this toxic positivity. Both things can be true. You can be deeply crestfallen and disappointed, and also remember that you have to left foot, right foot, left foot, and stay in motion. Both things can be true. I love that. It's beautiful.
I want to dig into a phrase that I've heard you use a few times, Chastity, which is bet on yourself, or permission to bet on yourself. Maybe you said that. Maybe I'm putting words in remembering.
That was brilliant.
Something.
I think I said it. A little laughter.
But I want to know, we all might have a different idea of what that means. What does that mean to you? And what does that mean to the moms that you work with?
I think for our moms, I often think about my mom. I think for a lot of our moms in a lot of marginalized communities, a lot of folks experiencing poverty. And you notice I say experiencing because poverty is not a fixed state. It's something that you're passing through. Mm-hmm. You say you don't embrace that too much. You're passing through. Experiencing poverty is betting on yourself is being willing to dream. Betting on yourself is being willing to color outside the lines. Betting on yourself is being willing to say yes and. Mm-hmm. And betting on yourself is also being willing to say no, not on my watch. And I think so many, especially women of color, as Indy has highlighted, 80% of JP moms are moms of color, especially folks coming from marginalized communities. And let's be honest, especially single moms, put your head down, focus on your kid, hold that shame. Don't, for moms to be able to pick that head up, to be able to say, Margaret Mead, what life am I going to compose for myself? What risk will I take? How can I ensure that my child is going to not just survive, but thrive? But better yet, how am I also going to model that and disrupt generational poverty even quicker by they having a mirror in the home? Those are some of the things I think about. And for myself, it is being willing to channel my inner Harriet. Some people say WWJD, I often say WWHD. Just remembering that she resides within me. In the absence of Oprah, Brene, all the folks, she says, not on my watch. I don't know what's on the other side, but it's got to be better than this. And for her to say that and get her mind there is one thing. But for her to turn around, can you imagine having a conversation around, so this is what I want to do? I mean, that, my friend, I'm good. It's hard, overwhelming, but when I really tap into that which is the part of my history, I get fired up. I get
Awesome.
fired up.
Anything you want to add, Eni?
I think she has it.
Excellent. Thank you both. I know we're coming to sort of coming up to the end of our time. So I think I'm going to end the Q&A there, because I wanted to throw out that I want to ask both of you. Well, actually, no, I think this will happen. In the resources and the email that's going to be sent out after the program is done, there was a question about getting involved and becoming a donor and a door opener. And so I will ask both of you if you have some materials for that, to please make sure you include those so everybody can become those things for you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions. And thank you so much to both of you, Chastity and Eni, for amazing presentations, thought-provoking, and as usual, keeping the bar high here at EDTalks for the presenters, and encouraging all of us to know better and do better. So I have some last bits of housekeeping. That, again, like I said, we'll be sharing tonight's video recording, and the resources hopefully coming from Eni and Chastity. Hopefully included in that some information about how to become those donors and door openers. So watch your email for that. And we have just one more EDTalks in the 2021 season that was rescheduled in response to the recent events in our community, the trial and the shooting of Dante Wright. So we hope you'll join us on June 14th to hear from Mikisha Nation and 4 young speakers from the Youth Leadership Institute as they discuss the power of youth voice and leadership. I'm super excited to hear from them. Thank you again to our generous funder, the Bush Foundation. They make EDTalks possible. And we also encourage you to connect with our event co-sponsors, Achieve Minneapolis and the Citizens League, to find out about all the great things they're doing in our community and how you can get connected and engaged. Check out their website addresses on the screen. I think those are up. Yes, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Good night, take care, and bet on yourselves.